Hello and welcome to Uppsala in eastern Sweden, just an hour or so north of the capital, Stockholm. And it's here where we tell the story of MachineGames. MachineGames has been one of Europe's strongest game design exports of the 21st century, helming the remarkably successful reboots of Wolfenstein and 2024's Game of the Year contender, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. But the history of this studio reaches back much further. The founding members of MachineGames originally worked together at Starbreeze, the studio responsible for The Darkness, Enclave, the first-person reboot of Syndicate, and in my own opinion, most importantly, the Chronicles of Riddick, Escape from Butcher Bay. And each one of these games, in both good and bad ways, was a stepping stone on the development journey of MachineGames. The next two episodes of this three-part series are going to dive deep into Wolfenstein and Indiana Jones respectively, but today on the first episode we're going to take a trip down memory lane to explain how MachineGames came to be. Our story starts in 1998, where a handful of young Quake mapmakers have been hired to work on a brand new game that will never see the light of day.
Obviously, we didn't have a clue, We were 7 people. We worked too much, of course. We got in the morning and then, stayed up late night because we didn't really have no one had any families. We didn't have anything like that. We were all single, pretty young guys. Played a lot of games, we played a lot of multiplayer games during lunch breaks and also in the evenings. And we had pizzas and hamburgers every day. We all got pretty fat. We just lived that life. And that was the cycle of life then for 7 days a week.
And we were something like 7 people in the office. And we had this super ambitious video game that we were building called Sorcery. And it was kind of, because we were young and stupid, we didn't know what it takes to make a game. So the vision was something like Skyrim, even though this was decades before Skyrim. But that's what we wanted to do, like a big epic fantasy RPG. So that's what we were working on, but we were way understaffed for something like that. And the publisher was bought by another publisher and they were kind of reviewing the portfolio. And they came and visited us and they basically realized, well, this game is never getting finished, so let's cancel it. But from our point of view, it was super weird because the strengths we have were very strong. I mean, what we had looked amazing, it just wasn't very playable. I guess that was the problem with it. But it was a huge learning experience for us. Like, it really checked our egos, and that was great, even though it was super painful at the time. So the way that resolved was that, because then we, of course, had no money because we were cancelled, so the way it panned out was that our company Starbreeze merged with this company in Uppsala. What then turned into the Starbreeze that actually shipped games was this fusion of original Starbreeze and O3 games under the name Starbreeze. And that's also what really intrigued us about O3 games, because they had shipped a game. So we were like, okay, they know how to ship something. It was called the Outforce.
And then we got a deal with Swing, German publisher for Enclave. And then we started to take another approach on Enclave to make it more of a fantasy game, because initially it was a multiplayer PvP game, Enclave.
The crazy thing was that we were so shell-shocked from Sorcery and not just not shipping it, but not being anywhere near shipping it. Like, what ended up happening was we made this game, we put all our hearts and souls into it, we shipped it, and then it wasn't good. That was another big shock and a big learning opportunity. Like, okay, we put all this effort into this, almost died doing it, and in the end it's not even good. So we really had to kind of step up and figure out. I mean, a big problem was that it was incredibly difficult and basically unplayable because it was so difficult. There's one moment where it's like an underwater level and the place gets flooded, blah, blah, blah. And already there are some puzzles that you have to solve in real time while you're drowning, basically. But if you somehow, and remember, there are no saves in this game, right? So if you die if you die at any point, you have to replay the map from the beginning. So, but if they somehow make it through all that, they get to the end, they're supposed to save this wizard. What we did was, there's like some trap there and 3 levers. So we thought, okay, let's make a lever puzzle. But then we thought, just pulling these levers in the right sequence, that seems like too basic and boring. Let's do something fun with it. So basically what happened was, regardless of the lever you pulled, every time you pulled a lever, there was this big spike that started dropping towards the guy you were supposed to save. So you pull one and he goes, that's not good. And then you keep pulling them, it goes closer and closer. You pull the last one, it impales him and he dies, so you have to start the map over. So obviously, to the player, it's like, okay, I just have to figure out the right sequence. But the problem is there is no right sequence. So the actual solution is there's another lever hidden under the stairs. And if you pull that lever, then you just let the guy go. So these kinds of extremely idiotic things we did a lot in that game. And some of them were unfortunately my fault.
After Enclave, the studio began work on a sequel, but due to some legal issues with their publisher, that game was cancelled and reworked into 2004's Knights of the Temple Infernal Crusade, which was promptly swallowed up by one of gaming's most incredible release years. But while Infernal Crusade came and went with barely any notice, for a lot of people the studio's next game would leave a lasting impression.
So Riddick came about originally because we had a tech demo. John Carmack showed Doom 3 tech with the stencil shadows. And the head engineer of Starbreeze is a guy called Magnus Högdahl. He's a brilliant guy. Spent the weekend implementing it, just for shits and giggles. But he did it in the game we were currently making. So he had made a demo in the Enclave. And then while we were building the initial version of Riddick, which was a light mapped version of the game, he focused on getting the technology so we could do the per pixel lighting and shadow stuff that we ended up shipping with.
The Starbreeze engine and the work Magnus did on that, especially when it comes to stencil shadowing, was a big deal for us because, and I think the most important thing for us that was to be able to get that in and to work with that for the Riddick game and also release it before id Software's Doom came out. So we were the first in the market with that type of tech. So that was a very big deal for us, actually.
And then I was the fortunate person that had to try to get all that working on the PS2 version. And that hardware wasn't really capable. If you look on the compatibility stuff that Xbox has been doing fairly successfully, Riddick is one of the games that still isn't doable as back compat because we didn't actually follow the rules.
Riddick would establish the foundation of how Starbreeze would develop their games. Due to working within the narrative constraints of an IP with one previous movie and a second one coming out, they had to establish the story early and stick to it. A narrative-first development cycle that mirrored the pre-production used on films.
First person worked well, we thought, for that type of game and also the story we wanted to tell, because we didn't really have any information about the movie. But of course we had Pitch Black. I think we can see a lot of that in our processes still today, and how we started to map out the game and worked with story and let the story drive the decisions for gameplay. And I think that's what generated all of these different styles of gameplay or different types of features that we add to the game. So I don't think we ever have been very good at, or at least not the best at, specific things when it comes to gameplay, but the mix of it all and combined, I think we do bring something unique to our games. And I think that is something that we still can see today, even in Indiana Jones, and how we let the story drive our decisions when it comes to gameplay features.
I would say 2/3 through development, the game got cancelled. But no, our publisher guy didn't tell us about it.
Okay, wow. So you just kept going.
We kept going, and because back then, if you released a movie license game, the whole purpose of that was like a marketing tool for the movie. And fortunately, the movie studio needed that component as part of their marketing plan. So they basically forced the publisher to restart the game again, uncancel it. So the game was like canceled for 2 weeks and we didn't know about it.
Very, like, lots of different systems had to be built for that game though as well. You know, it was not just like a first-person shooter. You know, you had disguise systems and all the stealth and, you know, lots of conversational systems and things like that. It looked like a game that the engineering team probably had a lot of work to do on.
So the complicated thing is that we didn't have a lot of time. It was a very short project if you look at today's timescales, and we also were a very small team. So fortunately, the engineering team at Starbreeze was highly competent. A lot of like really senior people. I believe we were like 6 or 7 programmers total.
That game, the Riddick game, it like came together in the last, I would say, maybe 3 weeks. Before that, it was quite bad, but last 3 weeks, everything fell into place, and it ended up being close to what we wanted it to be.
Obviously, at that time, you know, we were small. We were like 25, 30 people, and then and it was just me and another guy that built all the levels. And we also, of course, did all the. At that time, you not only did the level design, you also arted it. Obviously, you had artists that did the material or the textures, but when you actually built the level, you also arted them at the same time. And you also did the lighting for it. And the lighting was the challenging part with it, because we had this limit of I think we had 3 intersecting lights that we could have in these, especially when it was bigger areas. It was very, very challenging. I have a very fond memory when I went to New York, because we did a video session with him in New York. The reason I remember it so well is that we spent a few days, because we were so nervous that he wouldn't show up. We knew that we had a schedule that he was going to come to the studio, and we sat there and waited, and eventually he came. So everything worked out great, but we were very, very nervous about it, because this was our one shot to get it.
Haley says you owe him.
He should get that money from you, Riddick. You screwed my bet on Rust when you downed him.
You screwed yourself by betting against me.
And I think one thing that I remember that was fun was we had once a visit from Vin Diesel there as well. So he came to Uppsala, and we were on the balcony with him, and we had a cigarette, and stood there out smoking on the balcony. And we had people coming by and looking at up, and I think someone recognized him. And then he also went on to the pizzeria. Sometimes we go there today. And then we come in there, and then this guy behind the bar said, "Oh, Vin Diesel was here in the pizzeria once," you know. So they still talk about it, which is pretty cool.
That was a hugely fun experience. There was a lot of kind of technical progress on it, and we really kind of leveled up in terms of our game development skill. And you know, there was, as always, there was a lot of drama too. But you know, that was the first time we put together something that we kind of understood what we were doing, and we were able to ship something that we were proud of and that people liked, and it was a good experience.
With Riddick, Starbreeze had established themselves as a premier studio. They had taken a relatively tough external IP and wrapped it in an entertaining game with novel gameplay systems. And they had done it in breakneck speed. Riddick didn't break any sales records, but it left an impression and had given the studio more experience working with consoles, which made opening doors that bit easier. The studio's next game, The Darkness, would be another first-person shooter set in an established intellectual property with novel combat systems. In typical Starbreeze form, they ran into trouble with who is paying the bills on this project. The original publisher, Majesco, dropped their support of the game midway through development, but Starbreeze struck a deal with 2K to complete the game. It was around this time that some new collaborators joined the team.
I was applying for internship at Starbreeze, and I got the position due to I did a demon generator in Flash, where you could randomize the demons, and the current art director, he thought that was cool and was like, yeah, this is a good fit for Starbreeze. The first one I worked on was Darkness.
Okay, so what were you doing? I mean, were you hired as a concept artist?
Yeah, so primarily I started to work on demon designs and some environments of spooky castles and other things. But yeah, it was a very, very cool project.
we would always have to, either we had the audio of a character speaking, and then we had the actors in the mocap volume trying to kind of act that out and make it all work, or the other way around, we had the motion capture of the people and we had to match that. So I was thinking on the Darkness, like, isn't there a way to record voice and body at the same time? Like, there has to be a way to do that. So I started brainstorming that with the mocap guys, and they were like, maybe we can do something with time code and stuff. And we would bring them into the booth, and they would perform everything and kind of act it out with their body as well. And then we used some time code to kind of sync that up afterwards. Yeah. It wasn't sophisticated enough where people would be interacting with props or each other. We couldn't have two people in that volume or anything. Like, it was one person at a time kind of doing stuff, right?
Yeah, that was interesting. That was an adaptation of a comic book, and we did our own take on that. And I came in working on combat, shooting, first-person stuff, dual wielding, things like that.
Yeah, it's a tricky game when it came to combat because you had the gun stuff, but then you also had your like sort of creature tentacle stuff as well.
Yeah, that's true. We had to find a balance between those so we wouldn't use only one or the other. But yeah, that was a nice challenge. Yeah.
That whole thing was kind of a pet project of mine, the TV channels, because it's all about that kind of making the world feel real. And I found all of these different things that was in the public domain. I was able to source all of those things, and To Kill a Mockingbird is in the public domain. So that's cool. And that was kind of like the best movie that was available.
I loved also the gameplay implications of, like, the movie doesn't stop. So, like, when you sit down to watch it, you're like, how much of this fucking movie did they put in this game? And then you're like watching, it's like 10 minutes in, and you're like, wait, what, is it the whole movie they put in this game? And then you feel bad for, like, because you have to, there's a prompt, I think, to, like, get up and away from Jenny, you know what I mean? So it becomes this weird game of chicken between the player and the developer.
But this is the kind of thing that we really weren't sophisticated enough to think about back then. There's a lot of those problems in the Darkness.
The Darkness I remember because it was a big deal for us to work on with, because we did actually do a PlayStation version for Riddick 2, but it never was released. But Darkness, that was the first game that we actually got to release on PlayStation, so we had quite a lot of PlayStation focus on it. But what I remember most is probably also some of the mistakes we made. Same thing, you know, some related to scope. We had a very challenging and tough crunch period for it. And I think a big part of that is also the addition of multiplayer, which obviously no one really wanted to do, but you know, we had to check that box. So that was, we spent a lot of time on that, and it deviated from the core game experience. So that was the challenging part with it, I think. And also we work a lot with performance capture, we work a lot with actors, we work a lot with making sure that, you know, everything that we do in terms of storytelling has an important part in the game. So there's very little room to move something out, or it's very hard for us to scope down. And that is probably what I think we have been working more with towards the later parts of our career. How we can, you know, be a little bit more flexible in terms of our scope. The approach to storytelling and how that determines what type of gameplay features we're adding that came out of Riddick and that we're still doing today.
After The Darkness, the studio would go on to sign a 2-game deal with their biggest publishing partner yet, Electronic Arts. The first game would be a reboot of the isometric Bullfrog title Syndicate, while the other was a game based on the Jason Bourne franchise. Two exciting projects for any game studio, but sadly for many of the developers at Starbreeze, this partnership spelled the beginning of the end.
I think it was, I mean, it's a lot of different reasons. For myself, and also I know for Jens and Magnus, it came down to us, we felt that we lost a little bit about our creative control. And I think that was the big one. As we started with Swing, we moved over to Vivendi, and then with The Darkness with 2K, and then we moved over to work with EA. So the publisher also got bigger and bigger and bigger, and they had different processes. It was a challenging time because we felt, first we were split up a little bit in our core team because we had one part we're working on a Syndicate game, with EA, and then me and a couple of other guys, we started working on a Bourne game, a Jason Bourne game. So we ended up at Starbreeze with this, not competition, but at least we were fighting for resources internally, which was a challenge. And it's very easy to end up in this situation where you have one A team and one B team, which is not very healthy either.
What would happen was, like, we would present an idea, and the publishing layer that we were interfacing with was like, yeah, that sounds good, let's proceed on that. We started building it, and then 6 months later, that information would trickle up to their superiors, and their superiors would say, no, this is the wrong direction, make the team change it. And then we're like, okay, fuck it, we stop everything, stop development, let's reboot it, we're gonna build something else, tell us exactly what you need, and we'll build something within that framework. And they're like, yeah, okay, we're thinking this and this, okay, so we start building that, and then they're like happy. And then 6 months later, their bosses see it and they're happy. And then a few months after that, their bosses see it. And then it's like, no. So that game was like stop, start. And eventually we're like, okay, this, it's impossible. Like, there's no way. Because it's not like they give you more money and more time to accommodate these changes. Like, you're still on the same budget and timeline. We basically came to the conclusion that, okay, we need to start something new where we can control this better.
When the founding members of MachineGames left Starbreeze, they did so with no deal, very little money, and in the aftershock of the 2008 financial crash. What followed was an 18-month period of failed pitches, depleting resources, and eventually, the opportunity of a lifetime.
It was an experience I wouldn't wish on anybody else. It was fun and cool for the first 8-10 months, but when we were just waiting on getting communication data, like, are we moving forward with this? Is this happening? And no responses. Like, we'd get an email every 2 months. Like, that was a nightmare.
We invested all the money we had in MachineGames. We were 7 of us at the time. 2 dropped out during these 1.5 years. 5 of us stayed on and trying to really get something going. We had, I think, 4 concepts, and one was called Steel, that we pitched pretty hard, where you played as a robot.
We figured out that, so for the company, we would create co-op games. We would do 4-player co-op games, that was all we would do, and then we would set up like 5 different pitches. We had a robot game, we had an air game where everything, like, there was no ground level because the world was polluted. So I took 2 of the 5 pitches, I believe, and took them to this is what we can go and pitch to companies.
We went around, we pitched those games, we went to Bethesda 2, and then we did that for about a year. But then also we were out of money. And I had to sell my apartment here in Uppsala, so I had to move back home to my hometown. But it became pretty tough for us. We started to look into, I talked to Jens because he was working at Lucas. So we had those, a few of those backup alternatives if things wouldn't go our way. So we were actually very close to giving up. It was just a matter of weeks, I would say.
The first company, I believe among the first companies we met with, was Bethesda, and they were interested. And then everybody else is like, not really right now.
Late spring in 2010, and then Bethesda got back to us, and we got this opportunity to spend 3 weeks at the software office.
How much in the conversations with Bethesda is directly the idea of you guys working on a Wolfenstein? Is it 1-on-1? Is that sort of reason, or does that come later?
I think it came pretty early on because it was working on Rage, and Wolfenstein was, they didn't have any plans on working on it. They did work on the next Doom game as well. They have started work on that. So I think Wolfenstein was, one of those IPs that they wanted to really use because they recently acquired id Software too. And I think they saw MachineGames is a good fit for taking that on.
They wanted us to go visit id in Dallas, likely to be get evaluated, but also to do a game pitch and also look at the tech that they were doing. Because like originally when we started the company, we had our own tech, but 2 of the 3 engineers who built it left the company before we got to that point. But we were in talks with Bethesda, like, let's just use id tech. It was kind of a natural fit. So going to Dallas to look at it was hugely beneficial. So we were there for 3 weeks.
Obviously that was just, that was a way for them also to see that we can work in that environment and, basically to prove ourselves a little bit, right? But we went there and we were only 7 of us then.
We got there, came into the offices, introduced everybody. I got to meet my childhood hero, John Carmack, which was amazing. One of the first things I got was an email address that had id software, so I had to send an email to a bunch of friends back home.
He said the same thing.
Yeah.
So I sent mail home to all my friends, Gustavsson at id software, that was super cool. And obviously we went all in, we said to ourselves, this is our opportunity, this is our chance.
The pitch that we had brought when we came initially, or rather we brought 3 pitches. They were all co-op 4-player based, but that was with the old tech. And with id techs, it doesn't have this capacity. So if we want to be confident that we can do this, we should look at what Rage is, use that functionality to build our first game. So we don't have to build as much tech, because then that allows us to focus on finding the people, building the company, building the game, rather than also building tech.
And then, we looked at Rage, because they were working at Rage at the time, and they asked us, maybe you would be interested in doing Wolfenstein. And of course that was a big deal for us too, because, it's such a classic IP, and, the grandfather of first-person shooters, all these things. So,
entire storyline was put down during those 3 weeks. We pitched it to the group at id, not entirely confident that they were super sold on it, but it's like, let's move ahead with this. Because I've heard stories otherwise after the fact.
We had these 4 ideas, 3 of which was kind of in the normal Wolfenstein universe, and the 4th one was this more retro sci-fi futuristic version. And Kevin Cloud was like, which one do you like best? And I was like, we love this one, the retro sci-fi one. Okay, so let's proceed with that then. And then meanwhile, they are having arguments internally, but we don't know that, of course. That came out way later. Like, are we really letting them do this to Wolfenstein? But somehow we managed to earn enough confidence from them during that period of time.
And at the same time, we also spent a lot of time learning the tech. So we built the map there in the editor. So we did that towards the end as well. We showed them what we had done in the actual Rage engine too. So it was not just that design phase of actually just putting the New Order game on the wall. It was also learning the tech and the tools. So we spent a lot of time on that.
And then we kept talking to Bethesda, and they figured, why should we give you this amount of money? We could just invest it in some studio we already own. It's like, okay, let's go that direction.
The original MachineGames company was folded and a new version was created with Bethesda Softworks as owner, and it would be under this umbrella that the studio would create their next 16 years of hits. And in this series we're going to explore the design and development of those titles. The next episode in this 3-part series explores the design of MachineGames' Wolfenstein series, and if you're a Noclip Early Access patron, you can watch that video right now over at patreon.com/Noclip, a full week before its public release. But before the studio could begin on Wolfenstein, they would first need to hire some extra help. Some faces may have been new, but most of them were very familiar.
I was very happy with Starbreeze. It was a very cool company, and obviously because it was a company I worked where a lot of the people I'm working with now formed and was my co-workers for a long period of time. So switching over to MachineGames was basically like coming home again to some extent. I had a very short interview process. The current art director / creative director Jens Mattis, he basically just had one question for me, and it was something along the lines of, do you want to draw and design retro futuristic Nazi robots? I was like, yes. It's like, cool. When can you start?
My brother moved to London at the same time when I moved up to North to start Starbreeze in '98. So I've been visiting him quite a lot of times, and he lived at this road called North Court Road in Clapham Junction in London, and they had this restaurant called Nando's, which is like, you know, from South Africa, I think, Portuguese and chicken restaurant. So we went there and eat every time I visited him because I love Nando's, and then we have 2 beers and some extra hot chicken. and every time I went there with someone from the studio too, we always went to Nando's because it became a thing. And then we said, you know, if we ever get a contract with MachineGames, so if we ever get a publishing contract or ever we are acquired, whatever it may be, then we will go to Nando's and celebrate. So what we did then, the 5 of us that was still left then, we brought Magnus, who has jump chip a little bit earlier, but we brought him with us anyway. And then we also brought our 2 first employees, Magnus Avenen, who is now our technical director, and also Torbjörn, who is our lead level architect. So those were our 2 first employees. We brought them too. So we actually took a plane to London early in the morning from Stockholm. And then we just took a taxi from Heathrow to the closest Nando's, and then we spent pretty much 4 or 5 hours, I think, in Nando's. Ate a lot of chicken, drank a lot of beers, and then we just took the taxi back to the airport.
No! Oh my! Wow!
Yeah, so that was pretty fun. I have some images of that still, and that's a fun memory actually.
The ultimate cheeky Nando's.
Yeah, that was our big getting acquired celebration.